Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Evan Scrimshaw. In what is honestly one of the more surprising things I think I'll ever do in politics, I have the artist formerly known as Too Close to Call, Bryan Breguet, on the podcast. Bryan is a seat projection wizard, former BC Conservative Party candidate in Langara, and used to be genuinely one of my least favorite people on Twitter. We're going to talk about the general state of the Liberal leadership now that we've had the field whittled down to Mark Carney, Christopher Freeland. I mean, I guess Karina Gold probably deserves to be above the clown car calamity of the Chandra Arias and the Jamie Batiste. Is that his name? But Bryan, thanks for agreeing to do this. Thanks for coming on the Scrimshaw Show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this would not have happened in 2019. Like we hated each other way too much on Twitter. I guess things change. But so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that things changed is a polite way of I got my head out of my ass and stopped thinking that my shit didn't stink. So obviously Trudeau finally resigned. It's been a week. A lot of people that we were expecting to run for the leadership: Anita Anand, Dom LeBlanc, Francois Philippe Champagne, Melanie Joly. Thank fucking God she didn't run. A lot of people sat this one out. The race is Carney Freeland. I think I've written about this race quite a lot. You haven't. I mean, you've tweeted about it, but just sort of top line. What did you make of the Trudeau resignation? Were you surprised that he resigned? What do you make of the fact that so many of the cabinet ministers, took a pass? Just what do you make of this race? Go with it wherever you want to go.
Yeah, no, I wasn't surprised he resigned. I think at some point it really became, unsustainable for him. And I was almost expecting him to maybe try to call the bluff and call a snap election. But something had to happen. We couldn't last like this until October with this caucus hating him. So I'm not too surprised. I have mixed emotions. As people know, I've never been a fan of Justin Trudeau. I wanted him to lose the election, right? So I'm glad he's gone, but I really wanted him to actually lose the election, not pass the hot potato to somebody else. As for who's going for it, I don't know. I mean, we always talk about all those big names, and obviously, they all have, especially, Joly or Champagne would have had Quebec with them. But at the same time, when you look at the situation where the Liberals are, I'm not too surprised big names don't want to go. I feel it reminds me a little bit of the 2017 Conservative leadership race, where many big names like Mackay, Charest, others just decided to sit this one out because they all thought that Trudeau was unbeatable in 2019. I think in hindsight, it was a mistake. They should have gone for it, in particular Georges Charest. But I'm not too surprised they're not going for it, especially if they know that the big names. If Carney and Freeland go, that's really two really big names. I would think it would be difficult for the others to be successful.
Yeah, I think the one difference between 2017, which is I think a fair point, is you couldn't call yourself prime minister, right?
Yeah.
At least whoever wins this is going to be the right honorable forever. And the thing is, I don't really understand why Mark Carney is running. And I've written this, and people close to Carney have reached out to me to be like, he's doing it because, he thinks he, whatever. But I don't really get it. I wrote a column saying I don't understand what Carney is doing. If I were advising him, I would tell him to run in Spadina Fort York, run against Kevin Vaughn, win that seat, and then win the 2026-7 leadership race, whatever. I don't know how long Liberals will take to do it. But, there are questions about whether that's... But I think similarly, that leadership race is going to be the leadership race that really nobody wants to run for, because this is going to be a two-election recovery, I think, at a minimum for the Liberals. I think nobody should be under the illusion that the Liberals are going to be able to bounce back in one election, partially because Trudeau took so long to resign. when I had David Coletto on the show in December, I asked him. Funnily enough, I had him on exactly 1 week before Chrysler Freeland resigned, and all hell broke loose. But I asked him if the Liberal Party had listened to me and Justin Trudeau had resigned after the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, would they be in a better place than they were at that point? His answer, and my answer was certainly yes, obviously. His answer was probably yes. Do you think that the Liberals would be in a significantly better place if Trudeau had resigned 6 months before he did?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is very similar, I think, for different reasons, obviously, but it's very similar to me to the Joe Biden in the U.S. The Democrats would have been better off if he had announced, 6 months, 9 months before the election that he was not running. Trudeau is hated, right? I mean, obviously you have policy mistakes, and they've been correcting some of them recently, but we're at the point where he's so hated that nobody cares, nobody listens. I mean, I've done knocked on thousands of doors, and the hatred for Justin Trudeau in Vancouver was amazing. Like, that was really, really, so many people were telling us we hate Trudeau, we want him gone, like from all ethnicity, age, background. This was really the one constant. And then, because that was always good for me if people believe we were the federal conservative, but then when I had to tell them, oh no, we're the provincial conservative, then all of a sudden you could tell like the intensity would be so much lower. They're like, oh, okay, the NDP and EB, yeah, they're not perfect, but so there was no question that Trudeau was sinking his party significantly. And so the sooner, if he had gone like a year ago, at least you had a chance to maybe, come back, do some policies where people pay attention, and you never know what happens in a year and a half. But now it's not even going to happen, right? Whoever wins this race, I don't even know if they have a few weeks, right, as prime minister. It could be, literally just a few weeks, and then it's an election. So they will not have time to improve things or do anything.
Well, that assumes that Jamie Singh has a spine, yes, which we'll get into in a minute. I think that's fascinating that even amongst people who ended up voting for David Eby or who could not muster that animus towards Eby and the BC NDP, that there was still that latent hatred for Trudeau. I mean, that was my supposition, just given I tend to, I've been extremely anti-Trudeau since the budget, but Toronto St. Paul's was really my radicalization moment of no, this motherfucker needs to go. The fact that so many people who are even open to other progressive ideas are done with him and just plainly aren't listening, right? Like Tyler Meredith made this point a lot in the immediate aftermath of the April budget, which was the individual policy measures. And I don't want to argue with you about the economics of especially the cap gain stuff, but the individual budget measures tended to poll okay to good, right? They weren't significantly underwater as much as, the Globe and Mail fucking op-ed section wanted to print they were. But nobody cared. The Liberals' polling got worse after a budget whose individual measures were fairly popular or at least not unpopular. And it's that just makes clear to me that nobody is listening. That Justin Trudeau could announce a cure for cancer and his polls were probably not going to get any fucking better. And once that was the case, it became obvious to me that he couldn't go on. I think the other thing about Trudeau and why he needed to go and why I was still fairly confident he was going to go, even when a lot of people were like, oh, he's just going to run out the clock, come back in January, and he's going to stay, was, I tend to be the international politics guy. Lord knows I love an international comparison. But generally, when that many people want you to go, once you've gotten to the stage where the news networks have to go to live nonstop coverage of will there or won't they, no leader has survived that, right? No Australian prime minister has survived it once the ABC has to go to live coverage. And it just, no one can put the genie back in the bottle once the genie is out. And I thought the fact that Trudeau took the entirety of the holidays when it was exceedingly clear in early, mid-December that he had to go, even if we had just had those 2 extra weeks, the Liberals would be in a better place. But we've got to run a shortened leadership race. Literally, the leader will be announced, March 9th or the weekend of March 9th. it's entirely possible, that we could be in election 3 weeks later, right? Because Parliament comes back the 24th. If the NDP actually has a spine, we're in an election, boom, and it's right there. I don't know why. I mean, I'm pissed at Trudeau for many, many reasons. I think he's done significant damage to his legacy amongst the Liberals, and I don't know if he quite realizes that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right to his legacy. And, I'm not a Liberal, and, I haven't been very happy with this government over the last 9 years overall, but he should really be thinking, and his team should be thinking about the legacy in terms of policies, right? I mean, the longer he stayed, the more upset people were, and the more all of the stuff he did will most likely be undone. So I don't know why, and as much as I don't like the Liberals and I find them elitist, at the end of the day, they're still the party where more often than not, they will listen to the right people, right? And so, let's take immigration. They realize that they made a mistake. I genuinely believe that they realize, and it's not just because they're dropping in the polls. I think they talk to, Mike Moffat and other economists and be like, okay, yeah, we screw up. We need to fix this. So overall, they want to improve the country. Most of the policies they've done, at least in the first mandate, were at least rational, and you could defend them. And so I think there's a real risk, right, that the longer he stayed and the worse the defeat would be, that then Poilievre can completely undo what they have done. And they should be thinking about this, or if they care a little bit about the country and not about just, themselves.
Yeah, like people tend to... let me just put it this way. Do you think that the governance of a Poilievre majority where he has 250 seats versus the governance of a 190 seat Poilievre majority, I think he would be significantly more radical if he has 250 seats than if he has 190. Both of them are majority governments, and theoretically he could do whatever he wants. But if he's got 250 and the Liberals are in third, and he literally feels like nobody can fight him at all, of course he's going to be more radical. Of course he's going to be more willing to dismantle the parts of the liberal agenda that Liberals think are, great and amazing. Am I crazy on that, or do you agree that the size of the majority does affect how radical Poilievre will be?
Yeah, I think what you're saying makes sense. I guess the counter argument would be that, the difference between a 190 seat majority and a 250 seats is a 250 seats. It's going to get a lot more urban MPs, right? Like most of Vancouver would be blue, but at 190, most likely we might get one CPC seat in Vancouver proper. So the argument would be that, the more urban his caucus is, the more moderate the caucus would be, and they would want to keep these people. But I think the instinct, of Poilievre would be to, you look at the map, you see that you won, everybody agrees with you. And, I think politicians tend to really take every vote as a vote of confidence for their policies, which I don't think it is. A lot of people vote based on many other reasons than just policies. But he's going to do this, right? He's going to be like, okay, my policies are super popular. Even Vancouver Granville wants to defund the CBC, so let's defund it. So, yeah.
That is my general instinct. And I think the thing that even conservatives, who served under the last Harper majority would say is, the fact that even the Harper majority was a fairly narrow majority was a useful constraint on the worst successes of that government. And, this is actually my worst, most conservative opinion. Stephen Harper was a good prime minister. He was fine. He wasn't terrible. I didn't vote for him. I don't love that the Conservative Party has the, socially conservative wing that it does, but I get it. And, spoiler alert, gay man doesn't like a party where 60 some odd MPs vote for conversion therapy. Shocker. Breaking fucking news, right? But I think that I just, I do understand actually, because Justin Trudeau is a mass narcissist and completely up his own ass. And Katie Telford, did you see the story about Katie Telford literally screening Trudeau's calls during in December and only letting the ones pro him staying through through to Trudeau. Like, Katie Telford owns a lot of this, and I don't generally like to blame political staff for decisions because I think that's generally a cop-out to protect the political, like the principles. Katie Telford owns a lot of this, and I think that she is going to go down as a significantly negative force in progressive liberal politics moving forward, and I don't really understand how anyone can disagree with this.
Yeah, no, but I think people, and I didn't realize before running myself in politics. Yeah, no, the staff and the staff around the leader, they matter quite a lot, right? And they can indeed influence the leader a lot. I mean, I think sometimes people think all politicians have like, those policy wongs and they have like those policies they want to implement. But that hasn't been my experience as a candidate. Many candidates have no policy desires, including like people who are high up in the party. They just want to take power, right? And so a lot of time it's the staff around them that will actually design the policies and whatnot. So yeah, so I could totally see that Katie Telford would have a significant influence, just the information she relays, right, to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, because that's of course the thing, is that not like there needs to be it political news, security news, whatever, like there is of course the screening process of what gets to the PM. I will say there was something deeply funny to me about this leadership race, which is I get to do a little bit of American media sometimes. And I sort of have taken on the sort of Canada explainer role on a US politics podcast. And the things that I get to say on that podcast that like, oh yeah, just pointing out that Melody Jolie is like literally an idiot. I say that on that podcast and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, that's great. I tweeted that on Blue Sky one time, or posted, I guess. I don't know what the term is. I got called up massages so many times. The funniest thing, because it's like, I'm sorry, a foreign affairs minister who thinks it's colonialist to appoint ambassadors to important African countries. I'm sorry, she's an idiot.
Yeah. Like, I've got the same, right? Because I think I said the same. I'm pretty sure, and I've literally said in the same tweet, Chrystia Freeland is smart, but Melanie Jolie is an idiot. But yeah, I've got people who tell me, oh, how could she be an idiot? She went to Oxford Law or something like this. I'm like, honestly, it proves nothing. It really, I don't care. Like or maybe she's smart in some aspect, but I think I will always remember. I think the day I discovered how stupid Melanie Jolie was might have been 2019 or 2021. It was the election night on CBC, and she was doing an interview, and she genuinely could not handle the softball questions from the CBC. And I was like, how can this person be a cabinet minister? There is no way she can handle anything in a room. So yeah, and I've been proven right ever since.
An election night interviews, especially when you are the winning party at an election night party. Like, I don't even want to litigate the CBC part of it. Those are the softest balls of softballs.
Yeah,
you won the election. It's like, what are you going to do with your mandate? Like, it's. Oh my God! No, she's an idiot. I mean, she's not the worst cabinet offender, I gotta say. So, Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney have both announced that said that they're gonna either scrap or significantly modify the carbon tax. Right? That's fine. Whatever. Here's my thing. Can somebody announce that they're going to fire Stephen Guilbeault? Can somebody announce that, please? This is a cabinet minister, and obviously people can hear your accent. This is not me being anti-French speakers, right? Love Montreal. I have waxed lyrical about Montreal on my site multiple times in the last 10 days. Pick a fucking environment minister who can speak English without putting his fucking foot in his mouth. Okay? Every time Stephen Guilbeault speaks in English, he fucks up what he wants to say. Remember when he said they're going to build no new roads? When what he meant to say was, we're not helping Doug Ford fund the 413. Because that was what he actually meant to say. That was the actual substantive announcement he wanted to make. And instead of saying, we're not going to help Doug Ford fund the 413, what he ended up saying was, we're not going to fund any new roads, which had to get cleaned up by staff within about 90 minutes. How is Stephen Guilbeault still the environment minister?
If I were a liberal backbencher, I would be so mad, I think, at this point, because there have been so many reshuffling of the caucus. And the fact that, some of them still haven't made it, but Stephen Kilbo, Melanie Joly, Randy Boissonneau were still in the cabinet minister for the longest time, I would believe it, honestly. I would be like, what do I need to do? Like, at some point, it doesn't make sense that these people keep getting those big jobs. But it's politics, right? I guess but even from Quebec, right? They had a large caucus from Quebec. They can find better people from there to be cabinet ministers.
Yeah, move fire Guilbeault, move Mark Miller to environment, because respectfully, we need an immigration minister who doesn't announce every cut in immigration levels through the gritted teeth. And I don't know, give Steve McKinnon. I mean, I'm biased towards Steve McKinnon. Given that I went to school as a kid, shout out Liam McKinnon. There's 0% chance to listen to this podcast, but shouts to you, Liam. I guess we should get into leadership. In my mind, this is very much Mark Carney's race. We'll get into who's likely to win before we get into who quote unquote should win or is the better candidate. This is Carney's leadership to lose, right? I'm not out in Fantasyland when I say that Carney's the pretty obvious favorite, right?
I think so, especially at this point. I mean, maybe let's revisit this once they both officially announced, but I'm a little bit shocked by how non-existent Freeland has been in the discourse over the last 2 weeks. And I don't think there is, but she's getting some endorsement. I think the only reason, I'm not making a definitive call on this yet is I don't know what the liberal membership looks like. I have a pretty good idea of the conservative membership. And so, you and I, as soon as Joshua announced, we're like, yeah, no, he has no chance with this membership. But, the last time the liberal membership had to elect a leader was, over 10 years ago. So I'm not sure exactly. Is the membership just composed of 55-year-old white women? And so maybe Chrystia Freeland has more chances than we think she does. So, but Freeland needs to start getting traction, right? It's going to be a short race. Attention, sure, signing members, fundraising is important, but at the end of the day, you still need to generate some interest. And so far, Carney has been doing everything right on this. And if there is really a desire to move away from Trudeau, well, then obviously taking the guy that literally wasn't in the cabinet instead of taking the one that was with him the entire time until 4 weeks ago, I guess that makes a lot of sense. And I've said it many times, but I don't think Freeland is a smart person. She can be a good cabinet minister. I think she's a terrible politician. And I'm saying this as somebody who I wasn't particularly good as being a politician, but I honestly think I'm not as bad as she is. So she's just really bad at small talk and talking to journalists and whatnot. So I don't see how she does well in a leadership race when she actually has to go talk to people in rural Alberta and elsewhere. I think it's going to be a disaster for her. But maybe
who did she tweet? So the photo she released, we're recording this Thursday. I'm hoping it'll be on Thursday night. How did she tweet a photo where she's on her 5th cup of tea, but she has, for some reason, had 5 cups of tea in 3 cups?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, she also has way too much fucking milk in her tea. That is the least important part of what I'm about to say. How do you have 4 cell phones on the table? Even if 2 of them aren't your own. You are a woman who once invoked cutting Disney Plus to help fight inflation. And you have 4 cell phones on a fucking table? What the, she is ridiculously out of touch. She is now claiming to be the fighter of the carbon tax, that she has penciled in significant rises in the carbon tax. And I fucking love the carbon tax. I hate the fact that nobody else likes the carbon tax. But you cannot pencil in big increases in the carbon tax into 4 of your budgets and then also be like, yeah, actually, I hate this and this is bad and we should not do this. Without it, respectfully, you can't be believed in that. And this weird belief, I've talked to people who are pro-Chrystia. Obviously, I've endorsed Mark Carney, but I talked to people who are Freeland because the thing for me is I guess it would have been last week. I tried to write the case for Christopher Freeland, right? The positive case for her. And I got about my usual columns are about 1,000 words, 1,000 to 1,200 usually. If I go long, it's like 1,500. I got about 300 words in, realized I don't believe a singular word I've written so far, and scrapped the column because I literally could not imagine myself getting to 1,000 words of pro Christopher Freeland content and believing a single word of it. And so I talked to people. I'm like, make the case to Freeland for me. Like, what am I missing? And every time they said it, they were like, yeah, but she resigned from cabinet. Maybe that's something. It's like, is anybody going to believe a resignation where she openly admits she was going to be fired the day after? Like, is anybody going to believe that was a principled stand and not just the purest?
Yeah, she's not Jody Wilson-Raybould, right? Jody Wilson-Raybould enters this race and she's the anti-Trudeau candidate. I think she has, she people would believe it, and she would have her authority on this. But Chrystia Freeland, I mean, you resign after you knew that they wanted to replace you. That doesn't make much sense. And let's go back to the tweet with it's a terrible picture, right? I mean, she's saying that phone calls never stop. She shows 4 phones with no phone calls. Why does she have 3 cups? The table she's on looks super dirty. And we're in a day and age where who is her team behind her campaign? Because I mean, I would use the example of the BC NDP. The BC NDP is an incredibly professional party. Everything they put out there is well researched and well thought out. Like every picture every detail has been like, okay, so we need one woman here, and she has to carry a Stanley Cup because women like Stanley Cups, and then we're gonna wear this color and it's gonna be bright. They think of every little detail. And then the Chrystia Freeland, you would think she would be able to get some talented people behind her. And after days of being, completely silent and being silenced by the McCartney interview and whatnot, that's what she posts. So to me, that doesn't scream we're gonna be, it reminds me a little bit of Joshua, who announced with super low energy at the table, right? With a robot, a Gundam. It's like, well, okay, let's do this. Let's go for it. So those are people who I don't think they know how to campaign in 2025.
I mean, in fairness, in fairness to Chrystia Freeland, she hired the person who nearly lost Bonnie Crombie a race, despite the fact that the entire rule book and schedule of the leadership race was rigged for Bonnie Crombie, and who came third in a Mississauga mayoral race that was a 2-horse race, and then tried to stiff people out of pay and compensation that they absolutely deserved because he was mad that he ran a bad campaign. This is a fuck Tom Allison space forever and always. So I have been politely reprimanded for the number of times I've invoked this man's name. A campaign that is being run by Braden Cowley, but that is being voluntarily advised by Jerry Butts. I would like to make it clear, Jerry Butts is not running this campaign, but that is being voluntarily advised by Jerry Butts. Give me the campaign from the people who know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
Over Tom, I came in third in a 2-horse race, Allison, every day of the fucking week. Mark Carney, like that, honestly, the case for Carney is literally just Tom Allison doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I mean, Tom Allison was originally a Michael Ignatieff guy, which I think you and all of our listeners will know exactly how badly the Michael Ignatieff experience went for the Liberals. I don't know if you have any more takes. Like, do you think Carney? So if we both think Carney's favored to win, what do you think the ceiling, like best case scenario, Carney does really well, Poilievre botches the campaign. Like, what do you think the max number of seats Carney could win for the Liberals if everything goes right between now and then?
I'm guessing, I haven't looked play with the model that much, but I'm guessing, I maintain that in terms of percentage of vote, I don't think they can go to 30%, but they could go back to between 25 and 30. And I think really the best case scenario is they really just keep a lot of the urban progressives, right? I mean, the people who, for instance, in the recent BC election, they literally moved away from, they went to the NDP, right? I mean, like, so the west side of Vancouver, for instance, that literally went more NDP than conservative, despite the province as a whole going conservative by 10, in terms of swing. So you keep, downtown Toronto, downtown Vancouver proper. So I guess it pushes you to what? 90, 100 seats in the really, really best case scenario. You limit Poilievre to quote unquote small majority of like 190, 195. I think that would be the best case scenario, especially with Carney, right? I mean, because I think I have two minds on this. With Carney, I think that's what they can do, because they're gonna try to remain progressive, but I'm guessing call themselves a little bit more centrist. They will hope that it will be enough to keep those older voters, progressive, high income, that have like the Liberals, but you lose the suburb anyway. I think the other strategy for the Liberals, however, would be to go with somebody that is truly left wing and would just go with like make a deal with the NDP next election. Like just and the reason I'm saying this is, if I look in Alberta, I look in BC, I look in places where the left has been organized and has won or close to winning in Alberta. The left is united, right? And I've been very impressed with the left in how united. We know there are people in the BC NDP that are way more radical than David Eby. Like, they're very, very left wing, and they just shut up. They've been shutting up, and they're quiet, and they just be like, okay, we're better off just being in this Big Ten party and winning rather than the conservative or the liberals. So at the federal level, I think the only way you stop Poilievre at this point is if you somehow manage to do this. You gather the entire left together, from the far left to the center left, and you say, we just need to be together and continue the policies we've had. And the only way to do this would be, well, you don't have time to merge with the NDP, so just make a deal, remove 50 candidates in some ridings, but then you need somebody that will want to be very left-wing, and Mark Carney is not this person.
Yeah, the problem with that is that you would have to amend campaign spending rules, because obviously your spending limits are based on the number of candidates you run, and if the NDP stand down in Brampton, Mississauga, Milton, like the Golden Horse, basically the entire Golden Horseshoe, and the Liberals stand down in your Skenas, your Vancouver Islands, your whatever, like, you're just reducing the spending limit and giving Poilievre a spending advantage. Or you're reducing the combined spending advantage that you have from two parties.
No, that's correct. I'm just saying, to me, if they want to prevent Poirier from winning, I think this is the only path. And I'm not even sure it would work, honestly. I think it's
I don't think it would work, because what would happen is the Greens would get 9%, and then
exactly
collapses.
But if they go with Carney, I don't think they can win, but they could could save the furniture, right? And I think Carney is a pretty good guy to save the furniture.
Yeah, so the case I made for Carney was like, and it's fucking hilarious that I ended up on the Carney train. Like, I was intending on supporting Steve McKinnon, and like, I'm just going to be honest, I was asked to write, like, I was sounded out on the Steve McKinnon thing by people close to Steve McKinnon. Like, this was not me freelancing, oh, what about Steve McKinnon? Like, no, that was a trial balloon from the campaign, and he ended up getting cold feet and not running, but that was an organized effort through me. I didn't really want to support Mark Carney. I'm not going to lie. I have been pretty mean to Mark Carney over the months and years. And I think the case for Carney needs to be made in the context specifically, not just of the case I'm making for him, but also the case I'm not making, which is I don't think he can win the election. I don't think anybody can win this election. And frankly, I don't think even if Trudeau had resigned in June, we could have won this election. Poilievre is pretty good at politics. He can be relatable. I don't think Jenny Byrne is particularly helping the cause, but I also think that, like, fundamentally, Poilievre is where a lot of the country wants to be. Yeah. And in a context of a global backlash against progressivism, I mean, if Donald Trump did what, 6-ish points better than he did in 2020, despite the fact that a woman's right to choose was repealed in the 4 years between those two things, and he did January 6th.
Yes.
So, like, even if you only give Polyev a 6-point improvement over, why am I blanking? Aaron O'Toole. Jesus Christ. I almost forgot O'Toole's name. But, like, even if you only give him a 6-point improvement, that's probably majority government. Yes. Polyev is not nearly as toxic as Donald Trump is. Like, respectfully, the people who call Pierre Polyev like Canadian Trump, like, no, I'm sorry, we have to push back against this, because the idea that, like, a milquetoast conservative who legitimately might not even actually undo some of the accomplishments of the liberal government is the same thing as Donald fucking Trump. Like, Polyev stood on stage in a conservative leadership debate and said that he's pro-choice. Yeah. And people genuinely want to say that he's like a threat to a woman's right to choose. Like, absolutely fuck off. But, like, Polyev's going to win this election. I'm wrong about this. And by the way, I want to tell you this. I am paying out this bet, the $100 charity bet that you and I have.
Oh yeah,
I know technically I could have welched on it, because the terms were Trudeau or Freeland versus Polyev. But I'm going to pay that bet out. You paid out the what the hell was our Alberta bet?
Oh, that was Calgary Elbow.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes. That was, you paid that one out to the Edmonton Children's Hospital.
Right.
I don't remember what the name of the hospital is at the moment. But yeah, no. Think about what your charity is going to be. I will pay that one out on election night. Because you were right. I was wrong. I thought the Liberals were gonna win this. They're not.
And so to go back, I think, to me, the reason I'm completely sure Poilievre will win is, again, I look back at the BC election, and the BC Conservatives, a party that barely existed, that was still not super organized even during the election, whose leader has zero charisma. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not being mean there. Everybody would say it. I mean, the debate, he was almost sleepwalking. Somebody who said stuff such as, well, why do we care about carbon? We're made out of carbon, right? So somebody like this, with the party he had, we got 44% of the vote, and we were within 3 seats of taking government. I'm just thinking, you do the exact same campaign, but you put Poilievre as leader. I mean, you get at least 5% more. So, I mean, and so you get all the same voters plus 5% minimum. So, yeah, as you said, the country right now wants change. Poilievre and the Conservative in general are giving them what they want. And so, I don't think there's any question that Poilievre wins, and he most likely wins a majority, because he will win the suburbs. So this is where we are at this point, yes.
You obviously the BC NDP, one of the big stories of the BC Conservative surge was minority voters. Obviously, EB had been even more progressive than this federal Liberal government on drug decriminalization.
Yes,
but there's been significant. The Liberals have propagated pretty significant bail reforms. Made it easier for people to get bail. Like, what did you experience in Langara, and what did you learn from that BC election in terms of why minority communities, both in your riding but also in Surrey, like, what are the lessons there for progressive parties, and do you expect to see bigger outsized swings both in Surrey federally, of course, but your Bramptons, your Mississaugas, your Scarboroughs, just sort of walk us through that, because one of the sort of big stories of the last 2 federal elections was that liberal suburban strength, right?
Yes.
The Liberals got big swings to them in 2019 in Brampton and Mississauga. They flipped Milton, despite Lisa Wright being there. 20-point swing to Liberals in Milton. I'll never forget that one from 2019. But if a lot of that was undone in the BC provincial election, feels like that could happen, that you could get even bigger, even if the Liberals sort of recover, to some extent, if minority voters swing, a lot of that golden horseshoe is going to fall conservative if minority voters are leading that swing. So what did you experience in BC?
Yeah, so I think in BC, and this is pretty funny, because I think ultimately we did very, very well with the Chinese voters. And I think it's funny because up to like July or August of last year, we had no connections with the Chinese. Like I remember going to events and we still had no Chinese candidates, for instance. They were still all with the BC Liberals or BC United. I would tell the party, I was like, what are we even doing? Like, should we not have some Chinese candidates, some Chinese organizers? And then ultimately we did very well with them. And so with the Chinese, I think very clearly that was crime and drugs. Like they hate this stuff. They will never forgive David Eby about the drug decriminalization. They were really, really mad. I mean, I would go to Chinese restaurant during dim sum hours and just to say hi. And you could tell, I mean, as soon as you would tell the people, David Eby legalized hard drugs, there would be like a light in the eyes and they were like, yeah, we hate this guy. So, now the question is, do people associate this type of policies only with Eby, or do they associate this as well with the federal government, which, was complicit? So, for the Chinese voters, everything law and order and crime and drugs, just go hard on this. Like just revert and stop being soft on crime and soft on drugs, and otherwise they will be very mad at you. I think the more interesting realignment we observed, however, was like the South Asian, right, the Indian voters. And this one might be a little bit more complicated. First of all, we saw in BC that was very much a grassroots movement. Like the party, I'm thinking like early 2024, when we were still, we were doing well, but we didn't have a full organization or anything. And we had so many South Asian candidates and organizers. They all wanted to be part of the party. So, and ultimately what happened in Surrey was very much grassroots. We had these guys who had never been in politics and they completely organized on their own and they ran amazing campaign. So I think we're seeing signs, both anecdotally and in the polls, like we've seen an Angus Reid poll showing that the South Asian, I believe, like were massively swinging to Poilievre compared to 2021. So there is something happening there, and I fully expect this realignment to happen at the federal level. So that's going to be, and there is a reason why Poilievre has worked so hard on getting these voters. He needs them. They're very efficiently located in their seats in the suburb that you need to win. But there's definitely something happening, especially with younger South Asians, that they really, really just are tired of the Liberals. And I think on this one, polls might not be reflective of what really is happening there. It's the crime, it's the drug, but it's also the social issues. I mean, I'm not saying you need to be, Poilievre or Restad. We didn't run as social conservative, but it's easy for us to get them now because the left has gone so far left on social issues that those guys really don't want to be with the Liberals. And I think Abacus has shown that the quadrant that was moving the most was the fiscally progressive, right, or economically progressive, but socially, or culturally conservative. And so, those are mostly Indian voters, I'm guessing. And so, yeah, I fully expect them to move to Poilievre.
Yeah, and I think so. We'll get into that Abacus thing in a minute. I think the other part of it is that in Canada, at the very least, like being pro-gay marriage and being pro-choice are not like. I think people who would self-describe as cultural conservatives would not necessarily self-describe as pro-life. Not everybody who self-describes as a cultural conservative would describe themselves as anti-gay marriage or as pro-life. And so, because that Abacus study, I think the only way that Abacus study is true is if many people who call themselves culturally conservative are also pro-gay marriage, which used to be the fault line. But,
yes,
I mean, Pierre Poilievre, soft launched the 2020 leadership race that never was for him, or leadership campaign that never was for him, by going to La Presse and saying, gay marriage has been a huge success. I was totally wrong about it. This is, that's one of the worst votes I've ever taken. Right. And to be clear, full credit to him.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we live in a country where conservative politicians can say that, can own that, and have absolutely and it doesn't even matter. There's no backlash to them for saying it. And so, given the context of quote unquote cultural conservatism in Canada, basically excluding the literal two main fault lines of cultural conservatism of a decade ago, gay marriage and abortion politics. Like, you're living in a world where, yeah, I'm sorry, the liberals have probably gone too far. And this is such a hard thing for me to like admit. But like, I don't remember her name, but the stars ombudsman on like social justice or whatever, race and equality, tweeting out like literally Hamas propaganda and retweeting Hamas propaganda.
Yeah.
And Jesse Bryan of Canada Land writing an article being like, Jewish Star colleagues don't feel safe to go to their like equalities ombudsman. And him being attacked, I remember that piece came out, and that day on Twitter was just like every progressive you could think of. Rachel Gilmore, David Moscrop, like all of that crew of people, right? Defending, I think it was like Sri Paranker or something like that. I don't really remember the name because I don't really care. But it's like all the entire defense of her was, oh, it's a woman of color. Oh, okay. Is that supposed to defend her against the idea that her ideas are batshit crazy? Like, and if the left is really going to defend people, is going to use minority status, be it homosexuality, being a woman, being a racial minority, they're really going to use it as a shield against legitimate criticism, then yeah, no fucking shit, the vast majority of people are going to stop identifying as cultural progressives.
Yeah. No, the lines have changed. And, on one hand, the progressives should just take the win. I mean, on gay marriage and abortion, they completely won the debate, and that's great. But the problem is they've been pushing, and I think they took those wins as saying, well, we can keep winning and pushing, nonstop. And obviously, I think right now, the line in the sand would be more about transgender issues. But even there, most people, during the BC election, one of the biggest surprises, right, was the fact that we won the BC Conservative, we won Surrey North, right, which required like something like a 30 or 40 point swing. And that was the Minister of Education that lost there. And I'm not surprised. I mean, I can tell you, especially again with the South Asian people, but even with other minorities, it's not even transgender issues, it's SOGI. So I don't know if, people who are not from BC, SOGI is a sexual orientation, gender identity. It's the name of the policy in school for inclusion, essentially, to allow, trans kids, gay kids, and whatnot to feel more inclusive. And, most of it is good, right? Let's be clear. There is a lot of good into this, but it has been pushed too far. And I have friends who I never talk politics with, and they have like a 7 or 8-year-old daughter, and she comes back from school and she got an education on, she almost come back from school and said, well, I'm not sure if I'm a girl. And you have no idea how upset they are. They hate this stuff. And so it has become very personal and emotional for many voters, because especially parents. And I think this is where really the progressive have just pushed too far. It was one thing to say, hey, gay people exist, they want to get married. And people are like, yeah, why not? And then, even transgender like pronouns, like they want to use a different pronouns. And most people are like, yeah, okay, if that makes them happy. But then you go so far that, your daughter comes back from school and doesn't know if she's a girl. And this really makes you upset, even if you're not political, and you're not, again, you wouldn't qualify as a social conservative usually. But by now, by modern progressive standards, you most likely do. And then you will vote for the party that doesn't want to push these type of things.
I think this is not an original opinion. I think the ease at which gay marriage happened, especially in the US, which unfortunately has a big impact on our political culture, but like, Barack Obama went from saying that, marriage is, a union between one man and one woman in 2007 to the US Supreme Court striking down state level marriage equality bans in red states in 2015. Like, I think a lot of people just kind of assumed that it was going to be this easy and dropped a lot of the more, because the thing about, especially if you go like actually read the real histories of the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s in the US, they were constantly worried about public opinion, about not being seen to go too far, about not, Rosa Parks was not the first person who refused to give up her seat on a bus, right? Like, but they pick their fucking fights, and the reason they pick their fights is that public opinion needed to be on their side, and they needed to be judicious in picking the fights they pick. And I think the ease at which gay marriage happened made us forget or not care as much about picking good fights. Like when Stephen Lecce, the then education minister in Ontario, talked about the issue of pronouns in schools, right? And he, like, if you actually read his real quotes, right? Yeah, he like vaguely said things about, parents have the right to know, and then left a loophole big enough to run the fucking 401 through. Obviously, in certain situations where the safety of children are involved, we need to take care of it. And like literally, if you actually listen to the things he said, my liberal bleeding heart couldn't fucking disagree with them, because of the policy is actually, in most cases, the parents should fucking know. But obviously, if they're going to like beat the kid to death because of it, then, we can fucking deal with that. But that's the problem, is that when you take absolutist stands, it just gets muddied. And I think this is actually a good transition point to absolutist stands. What the fuck are the NDP doing?
Yeah. So just to finish on this, those absolute stands, if I'm a progressive right now, I would be mad at those extremists, because, even after the US election, you have people like John Oliver who are on the air and they're like, oh, there is absolutely zero issue. Like, for instance, they're not even willing to admit the smallest thing. Like, for instance, for me, the symbol is always, if you think that, trans men or trans women, if they play sport in the other category. And I feel, this is something where like 80% of people think that, biological men should not be playing, team sport with biological women. But because we have to be so absolute, you either, you cannot have a moderate opinion on this. You cannot be of the opinion that you can choose your own bathroom, but in sport, there's gonna be a limit there. You either need to be full progressive and then you support trans movement everywhere, or then you have to be, full conservative and you either, I always lose my mind when, for instance, Poiliev answers questions when he says, oh no, washroom should be for biological women. And I'm like, but no, I mean, we don't need this. We don't need to go that far. This is mean. We have people who have transition. But the problem with the progressive being so radical right now is they're about to lose this fight. And they don't have to. They don't need to lose all this fight if they were to pick their battle. So,
right, exactly. And that's the thing. And that's the thing for me. It's like, I'd rather lose 60% than lose the entire thing.
So the NDP.
What is Jagmeet Singh doing? I guess this is my real question. It's like, what is Jagmeet Singh doing? Obviously, he has been a punching bag for me in recent years. Honestly, it got to the point where I was writing about how Jagmeet's a fucking idiot so often that I just like ran out of new ways to call him an idiot. He talked a big game about how we're going to take down the government at the first opportunity. Now it's, we need a Team Canada response in this moment of fucking crisis. Like, I'm sorry, if you can't read that as him building an off-ramp to potentially supporting the government through October, like, you're an idiot. Michael Kempa, who's a U Ottawa criminology prof and, formerly my professor at U Ottawa, he tweeted basically the exact same thing as me at roughly the same time. Like, everybody with a brain understands that Jagmeet is looking for a way out of his absolutist, we will take down the government at the first opportunity stance. What the fuck are the NDP doing?
I honestly don't know. For me, for instance, the worst example of the NDP really not picking a lane was it in December or late November, where there was a vote of non-confidence and the Bloc Québécois had already announced they were supporting the government. And that was after the NDP had already broken the coalition agreement. So that was a free vote for the NDP. They could have gone out there, vote against the government the way they, since they hate Trudeau and how he's helping low blows, rip off the middle class. So there was zero consequences for them. There was no risk of an election that day. And they still voted
for the government vote, because they announced they were breaking the supply and confidence the week before the Elmwood by-election. And then Parliament came back like the week after LaSalle and Elmwood. And the Bloc had already announced that they were doing it. And they still ended up voting against it. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify because I do remember exactly the confidence vote you're talking about. And it baffled me. You just did the cool song and dance.
You had to
vote with the government anyways.
Because fine, I understand if somebody calls their bluff, and if they're voting against Trudeau meant an election and meant going to deficit, in debt and losing half of your caucus. Okay, rationally, you might not want to do this, but that day there was no risk. That was an easy win for them. He could have stood up and be like, "Yeah, see, we're voting against you," and he didn't do it. So it's mind-boggling to me. I don't know what he's doing from a strategic point of view. I don't know if he knows what he's doing. I mean, we're so far away from the 2019 Jagmeet Singh, who actually won the English debate and won the end of the campaign and had the momentum. I don't know if this is a pandemic who broke him or what, but he's a really useless leader.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that gets me about Jagmeet is that everybody from the sensible wing of the New Democrats through people who are more right-wing than you don't understand what he's doing, right? Anthony Koch, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, former advisor to Pierre Poilievre, like every single time basically Jamie does anything, there's a Twitter consensus that runs from him through you, through me, through the more moderate and sensible elements of the NDP, right? That are like, what the fuck are the NDP doing? And if you can get me, you, Anthony, and the dipper, the sensible dippers that I know to agree on anything, I don't know that you could get the three of us to agree that the sky is blue, but you can get the three of us to agree that Jagmeet Singh is a fucking idiot who's killing this party. Like the greatest gift to the liberals is that we get to run against a fucking idiot right now who doesn't know what he's doing. His housing policy is nonsensical at a time when young voters are desperate for a leader who can say anything positive and good about housing, right? Pierre Poilievre is winning young voters, and not just winning them, destroying with young voters, especially on housing. And Jagmeet's big solution is to oppose fucking luxury condos because apparently the laws of supply and demand don't apply. He's a fucking dumbass. And the thing about his dumbassery, Charlie Angus isn't running again. Carol Hughes isn't running again. I think, who is the third? Rachel Blaney in North Island Powell River isn't running again. Like, the NDP are going to be wiped out of all of their traditional working class, sort of more rural or regional seats, because the NDP have always been a somewhat torturous, and I know the point that I'm making, and I've done this 1,000 times on the podcast and 1,000 times in the columns, but they are two parties stitched together by first past the post. They are a rural and regional party of cultural conservatives who want more money for their fucking hospitals and schools, but who don't give a singular fuck. And then they're a downtown Toronto and downtown Ottawa party of people who deeply care about like Gaza.
Yeah. And
Jagmeet is going to lose. But the thing is, all of their seats, because Jagmeet hasn't been able to win in Toronto and win in Ottawa and win in Montreal and win in, in these, university towns, the vast majority of your caucus is places like Skeena, places like Kootenay, places like Timmins. Like, isn't Poilievre just going to eat their lunch in all of these places, many of whom have already elected Doug Ford, or have elected either BC Conservatives or PC MPPs in Ontario? Like, isn't Jagmeet about to get fucked?
Oh yeah, look at the BC results, like Nathan Cullen in northern BC. That's another one of those riding where in every model, I think it was at least still likely or leaning NDP, and he got destroyed. That was like another 30-point swing. And so this is like a perfect example of the realignment. And the worst part for Singh is, as you said, he's not winning the seats he wants to win, like in downtown Toronto. And with Mark Carney as leader, I don't think he will win those. So he will end up in the worst case scenario. And the simple fact that his party, if we go back to even simpler analysis, right? Your main opponent, the liberals, like on the left, the people who are taking your voters, is down by like 13, 15 points. And you're down by 3 yourself. How is it happening? How is it that you're not up a little bit? How can you be down when the liberals are down by so much? You should be at least gaining a little bit on them. And so the polls have been terrible. You literally worse than 2021. The by-elections have been beyond terrible, every single one of them. It's mind-boggling. And Singh is doing so bad. And himself is being, like we see in the abacus number, right? His personal numbers are pretty bad now. A majority of people do not like him. He used to be loved, but he's now not liked anymore. And so we're at the point where even if he doesn't, he's not even prepping the field to do a nice campaign. Like I don't expect for a while I thought the NDP would once people pay attention, maybe they can gain and get some momentum. I don't think so. I think it's completely wasted with Jagmeet Singh as leader.
Like the thing that gets me right is that he's pissed off sort of like orange liberals, right? Because he's said so many things about the liberals that are bad. He's called the liberals, they're frauds, they're this, they're that, whatever. But he's also pissed off like orange blue switchers in places like Skeena, in places like Kootenay, places like Powell River, whatever, by propping up a liberal government.
Yeah.
You don't have incumbents in some of your most vulnerable seats. Northern Ontario is going to be a bloodbath for you. I think a lot of the non-Vancouver parts of BC are going to be disastrous for you. Okay, maybe you finally win Davenport. Like maybe you finally win Danforth. But who cares? If you're trying to stop Pierre Poilievre, which is ostensibly the point of the NDP, respectfully, winning a seat off of the Conservatives is way more valuable than winning a seat off of the Liberals. If your goal is to actually stop the Conservatives, which, it's arguable that it is, Jagmeet, the thing about the NDP, I understand what the Conservatives have done, right? I've understood why the Conservatives have done what they've done. I don't always agree with it, but I can at least, put myself in the shoes of conservative leadership or conservative staffers and be like, yeah, I get why you did what you did. I get why you announced what you announced. I don't get why the NDP haven't turfed this guy, because it's so obvious to everybody else that the conservative, I have a decent following amongst weirdly amongst Alberta conservatives. I have a decent following because I was mostly, Notley isn't going to win this thing in 2023, so a bunch of Alberta conservatives follow me. If I asked every conservative followed me, right, all of the smart people who work for Danielle Smith or who used to work for Jason Kenney or you or Anthony Koch or whoever, if I just blind polled asked them what would you do if you were the NDP, none of them would say keep Jagmeet. None of them, and none of the liberals that I know would say keep Jagmeet either. And it's if everybody else knows that your leader is a fucking disaster, I can't believe that the party doesn't realize it, especially given that even progressive columnists like me, Max Fawcett, we all know that Jagmeet needs to go. How the fuck did the NDP not realize it? What constituency left? Because everybody else knows that he needs to go.
Yeah, we sometimes make fun of the federal conservative for turfing their leader, since over the last 9 years, a little bit too quickly, right? It's you get one chance and you're out. But the NDP would benefit from being a little bit stricter and, having higher expectations of their leader. I mean, the best example I have of how Singh is losing everybody he had was I was door knocking with another candidate in Coquitlam, one of the two ridings, and we we knocked on this door of this guy who tells us he's like a union steward or leader at the I think the Port of Vancouver. So the working class NDP base, and he tells us, "Oh, I will never vote NDP as long as this dumbass Jack Singh is still in charge." And then I thought it was amazing, this interaction, because this guy wasn't that sympathetic to us. I mean, it's not like we left and he told us he would vote for us. He didn't love us, but he had decided he hated the NDP with Jack Singh. And then when we left, for some reason, this guy told us, "Oh, by the way, I have 3 cars. None of them are EVs because I hate EVs and there's not going to be EVs in this neighborhood." So this is a pretty good example of the voters who used to vote NDP and will never vote NDP now because of Jack Singh cannot pick a lane.
Obviously, so there are rumors that Doug Ford is going to an election next week. In fairness, that is what I had heard. I had always heard that the week of the U.S. inauguration was going to be the week that Ford went, like even before Trudeau resigned. It seems pretty clear by the fact that Nick Kuvelis, who is Doug Ford's pollster, just suddenly happened to have polling data last night of what Ontario voters thought of the federal polling. Yeah, no shit, because he's in the field constantly trying to make sure that, there isn't a secret Bonnie Crombie search happening before they call an election. What have you made of Crombie in general? What do you make of her chances against Doug Ford? Like, do you think there's any chance that we keep Ford out of a third majority? Like, just what are your general Ontario thoughts? Just because I think we're likely to face an election call next week.
Yeah, I think I'm of the opinion that people sometimes think that overestimate how comfortable the Doug Ford is with this lead. I mean, polls do show, even the worst poll for them would still be like 40-30, and so that would still be a very large majority, and they have a pretty efficient vote. But, his personal numbers are terrible, right? So my feeling is Ontarians are really just waiting. If somebody could just step up and be like a normal opposition leader, there would be real potential. I haven't been very impressed by Crombie, but at the same time, I haven't been incredibly disappointed like Jack Singh. So the same way I was saying that I don't think Singh is in position to have like a good campaign and some surge or momentum. I cannot say the same about Crombie. I think there is at least the potential where, I don't know, the campaign works well for her. She has the right opinion. She does a few good things at the beginning and she starts rising. And then I do think if one of the progressive, and by now it's going to be Crombie because the NDP, they wasted their chances. But if Crombie can get momentum in the first week and a half and we start getting better polls, I could see some sort of a snowball effect happening. And then all of a sudden, we're going to be in a situation where Doug Ford goes from, "Oh, I will win 96 to actually I could, at the very least, not get a majority." So I think the potential is there, but they're going to have to execute a much better campaign that they've been doing ever since she became leader.
Yeah, the problem for me with Crombie is I see the case for that kind of snowball, and especially, if we assume the Green vote, which tends to be 7-ish in the polls, but ends up being 4 or 5 in elections, a couple of those go to them. Merit Styles and the NDP. I mean, you want to talk about an NDP being out of touch. The first policy proposal of Merit Styles' NDP leadership was like anti-protest zones around drag bars. Like, talk about useless, out of touch nonsense. And the thing is, like, intellectually, I can see a case for Crombie getting to 30 seats, and like I've had that from people close to Crombie. And then I think about the fact that I don't like Bonnie Crombie was actively terrible in all of the debates in the Ontario Liberal leadership race. Like, she required notes, and most of her answers were pretty stiff. Like, I just don't. The thing about Crombie is that intellectually, I can see the case for her having a good campaign, and then I remember the fact that she had the entire race rigged for her, and she still got taken to a third ballot, and 47-ish% of the vote by Nate Erskine-Smith. And then I'm like, I don't know about that anymore. I mean, the thing about Ford, what I've always heard, and I'm fairly comfortable reporting this, is Corey Tedeschi has always been in favor of an early campaign. And Ford has always been a little bit skeptical that he had a quote unquote reason for going early. David Peterson, of course, went early in 1990 with literally no reason to go early other than he had a big polling lead. And that was what caused Bob Ray to win. And I think Ford has always been a little bit worried about that. I think he has found his reason to go early in the Trump tariff stuff. What did you make of the Ford hat? What did you make, and what do you make more generally of his sort of leading the Captain Canada thing Trudeau is still there, but in the absence of a strong federal leader?
Yeah, no, I think he and his team have been doing very well on this issue. They managed to seize it and exactly become this Team Canada persona, replacing or taking advantage of the vacuum at the federal level. And, this is what they do well, right? I mean, they might be able to reframe the entire Ontario election about this, when really the Ontario election should be about housing and cost of living. And they've been terrible on housing, really, really, truly, truly terrible. Probably the worst government in this country on housing. So that should be, and we know housing matters, right? I mean, and that's the number one issue. But, what people tell you in a poll, tell us your 10 or your top 5 issues, and how people actually vote, I actually think they're pretty different. And Ford and his teams are very good at finding those issues where they motivate people to vote. And it's not in the interest of Monique Crombie to have an election about the Trump's tariff, and because I think she's already, Ford is the guy who's seen as Team Canada, and people would just vote for him based on this. So I think if there is an election, Crombie will have to completely reframe. I mean, she needs to, Trump tariffs are bad, but we need to talk about housing and other things. But I don't know if she will be able to, because the news cycle would be entirely about this. I'm quite frustrated on this because, as you know, and many, I've been very public about this. I really, really do not like Doug Ford, right? I mean, to me, it's kind of like the symbol of everything I hate about some center right, on social or conservative issues. I think it's way too liberal at times, and he has been unwilling to go into any of those topics. They're not the most important to me. I'm relatively socially liberal, despite what people think. And then, he's running a large deficit. He sucks on housing, and he sucks on pretty much everything, right? He wants to do a new highway. He removes the bike lanes. So, and yet he's at 40%. So this is really frustrating to me to see leaders that are so bad and they still do so well. So I wish the opposition would do better in Ontario, but honestly, at this point, I'm pretty afraid, especially with the tariff and the Team Canada approach, that they've once again managed to reframe the question. Right? I remember before the last election, I think it was in 2021, there was this social media stunt where somebody was stuck in the snow and Doug Ford stopped and helped the guy, clear his
the great shovel photo op of January 2022. Yes,
Kyle Hutton, from Canada Polling and Twitter and Green candidate, was very mad. It was like, do you guys not understand? He's about to win the next election by doing something like this, and he was right. And so
the fucking tiny shovel. I'll never forget the tiny shovel. It's the dumbest stunt of all time, but it works. It works for him.
Yeah, it works. He has such a unique appeal to both conservative and suburban and minorities that it's really difficult to defeat him, because exactly, people don't vote on policies, right? And he can make them forget that their life are so bad right now, and the cost of living, and their kids cannot have housing because of him, or at least partially because of him. But nobody remembers.
Yeah. So you're. I think you tweeted yesterday. that your three least favorite politicians in the country
Yes.
right now are Trudeau, Doug Ford, and Francois Legault.
Correct.
I assume you're pretty happy with Francois Legault getting completely and utterly fucked in the polls right now.
Oh, I'm super happy. Yes, I mean I cannot stand Legault. So if he could be gone, obviously the PQ, I don't love the PQ because I'm not a separatist, but I'm at the point where when I start hating a politician as much as I hate those three, Trudeau is the worst of the three. But when I start hating a politician that much, I don't even care who replaces them. I just want them gone. So yeah, if the Liberals take Ontario, I'm fine with this because I just don't want Doug Ford to be premier.
So obviously I have a significantly emotional relationship to Quebec. I view Montreal as sort of, there's no city on earth that's better than Montreal. I love it. It's incredible. Like, my grandfather, worked in the Sun Life building. Some of the greatest moments of my life have been in Dorchester Square. Like I have a, emotional relationship to that city. There's a verve and a pep and just an energy that is, that you don't have in Ottawa, you don't have in Toronto, in Montreal. But like, the thing for me is like, I'm not that worried about the PQ winning because I think they're going to. I think that's the likely outcome. And honestly, I think the likely outcome is a PQ government and a Quebec Liberal opposition, assuming Paula Rodriguez is, I assume he's the front runner to win the leadership. Like, I haven't seen any polling on that, but that seems to be the consensus opinion. I'm not that worried about the threat of separation. Honestly, I kind of don't think the PQ, because the thing about the PQ is I don't think they can have a third referendum unless they think, like, you can't pull that trigger a third time unless you are pretty sure you're going to win it. And I don't think they're going to get the polling that says they're going to win it.
No.
Right. So I kind of think we're fine on the national unity front if the PQ wins. And, if the PQ just is sort of like bombastically anti Pierre Poilievre, but it's mostly just like a fairly left-wing government, I don't think it's going to be that bad. Am I crazy?
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be I think it's more an issue for the PQ, right? Because Paul Plamondon has been very clear that if they win, they would do a referendum. And I'm like, I don't know why obviously, they've learned their lesson. They need to have a clear position, right? Because the Paul Marois position where if we win, we will have a referendum if the winning conditions, quote unquote, are met. Nobody likes this. Like, you upset everybody. You scare the federalist and you don't satisfy the separatist. So he's learned his lesson and he promises a referendum. But at the same time, I have my doubt he would do one if he wins the majority because, well, as you said, the polling is nowhere near a position where they would win this referendum. Like, it's not fine. Campaign can change things, but they would start from behind by a lot, and with the undecided and everything. So I don't know why they would take this chance because that's a huge chance they would take, right? If they go for a third referendum and they lose it, well, yeah, it's at least game over for at least 2 generations again. So why would you do this? So my expectation is he will promise a referendum during the campaign, which will be interesting because I don't know how Quebecers will react to this. We've seen entire campaigns derailed when you started promising a referendum, and so I don't know how it's going to work. He's going to have to tone it down, but he has not allowed himself any room. He painted himself in a corner, right, over the last few years. So that's a tricky situation he's in.
Yeah, I think secretly certain Peckists would like a minority government where they can get most of their non-independence stuff through with Quebec Solidaire, obviously, but they can sort of blame the rest of the parliament or the National Assembly, apologies, where they can kind of blame them for being like, well, independence isn't really, on the radar, because it just, again, putting myself in the shoes of a pro-independence, of a separatist sort of person, calling a referendum when at best you're at 40% in the polls, like, seems like a disaster because again, you can't keep pulling that trigger. You can only pull that trigger so often, right? And I think the Scottish nationalists are facing a sort of similar thing of like they need to play their cards very well in a universe where the public aren't going to accept referendums every 5 years. Like it's pretty clear that that's not where the public are. And I mean, I think the fact that Jesus fucking Christ, like who's the premier of Quebec after Parizeau? Why am I blank on his name? Lucien Bouchard.
Yeah,
Bouchard didn't call a referendum, in the 90s. Like here and in 95, of course, they came within what, a point and a half of winning that thing. Like the fact that even Bouchard didn't find the winning conditions to be there in the 90s, like there's no universe in which the winning conditions are anywhere close now.
No, the only time since the previous referendum, the only time polls showed that the referendum and could win was during the sponsorship scandal. Like a few months where, for some reason, you're like, we hate the federal government and we would vote yes to separation. But, that's like a irrational reaction. I don't think that would survive 30 days of campaign.
Yeah, for sure. And even then, like, the Liberals probably did get lucky that we had a Federalist premier during sponsorship. Like, let's be real. I mean, the funny thing is that like I have been a massive Jean Charest hater in his post Quebec Liberal period since I've become a pundit. But like I actually quite like Jean Charest. Like I'm very grateful to him for what he did as Quebec Liberal leader, won the popular vote in 98, won 3 elections as Quebec Liberal leader, and even when he lost, he came 4 seats behind the PQ in 2012. Like, I actually quite like Jean Charest, which is why I tend to mostly blame Tasha Sheridan for all of that campaign's flaws, because that's just easier for me than to blame Charest. Do you have a take on Danielle Smith sort of not signing the communique yesterday, being on vacation in Panama during a national crisis? Like, do you have a take on any of that before we head out?
Yeah, I mean, I've been skeptical of the Team Canada approach, right? I think I publicly said, a lot of people who are calling for a Team Canada approach, essentially they're just calling for just shut up and agree with my position approach, which I don't think works. But at the same time, it would be nice if she wasn't on Team Anti-Canada so publicly. I mean, fine, you don't want to restrict the sale of oil or whatever, but you could just make those objections a little bit more private. I feel it's bad taste how she's really opposing like our efforts to fight those Trump tariffs. So, but I mean, obviously she's very successful. She's very popular right now, right? And very stable in her role as leader of the UCP. And she's probably doing the right move for her. I mean, to satisfy her base and her province. But it's for the country, she could tone it down a little bit. Maybe, when you do negotiation or bargaining, you could at least leave the other option open just as a threat. And she's really not doing this. And so I don't think this is optimal, but this is optimal for her.
Yeah, I think the thing that sort of angered me, and I'm gonna publish a column. I'm actually waiting to publish the column until this podcast is up, so I can link the podcast at the top of the article. But the thing that gets me about this is like if Francois Legault or any Quebec premier going back 30 fucking years, right? René Lévesque, Bourassa, Parizeau, Bouchard, whatever, Charest. If any of them had done this, had been like, no, you can't use my industry as leverage in a negotiation. Any Alberta premier would be screaming bloody murder about how, it's Team Canada until you guys are the ones at risk. And it's like, I went back and forth on this with on Twitter last night with Andrew Leach, and like, if you want to claim, if your actual argument is that this, that because of the nature of oil and gas, and that is the most effective stick to hit the Americans with, which I actually agree with, that it is the most effective stick, And your position is basically then we need to be made whole for taking the hit. Okay. If you want to tell the feds, okay, fine. You're funding one of the hospitals that we keep promising Edmonton or Red Deer or whatever. You're funding it in full. Great. Okay. Fantastic. I will accept that, yeah, you probably are taking a greater hit than the rest of the country and you need to be made, quote unquote, made whole for it. I'd accept that. But you gotta you gotta play ball to get me to the point where I'm willing to say, okay, that's fine. You'll get what you deserve out of this because you are kind of getting fucked out of this. But you got to play ball with us to get to that point. And I don't know what she's doing other than maybe thinking that she has more leverage with Trump. But I think that's a stupid belief.
That's an interesting point you're raising. Then it just made me realize this could set up a situation where Poilievre will be quite opposed to Smith, right? Because Poilievre, and we saw this morning, I think he's realizing that he pretty has to take this issue, right, of the Trump tariff and appear strong and essentially do the dog for Team Canada. But if he does this, which would work in most of the country, he could end up in a situation where Daniel Smith doesn't support him, right? I guess he's not going to care because, let's face it, you're still going to win almost all the seats in Alberta, but it would be an interesting situation where the two most popular conservative leaders in this country, do not get along.
It's interesting that Scott Moe is being significantly more supportive of a Team Canada approach than Daniel Smith, because honestly, if the claim is that the Trudeau Liberals are trying to screw provinces that don't agree with them out of policies, if Scott Moe and Daniel Smith were together opposed on this, I would probably buy the argument that the Liberals are trying to screw them a little bit more. I guess my last question is, what did you make of the story that Mark Carney might run in Edmonton? Do you think that's just bad reporting? Do you think that's just a trial balloon? Or do you actually think he might be stupid enough to actually genuinely try and run in Edmonton?
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, supposedly he's going to start his campaign in Alberta. That would make sense. You mentioned it on Twitter, right? I mean, you run in Alberta to differentiate yourself. You don't want to run in Ottawa Centre or Ottawa Valley or these type of things where you would win your seat for sure, but then you call a Laurentian elite. I mean, are there really that many seats they can win in Edmonton? Like, obviously, the Randy Boissonneau seat would be, but he just said he's not leaving. So is it a miscommunication, or was he expecting Randy to just leave and he could take his seat? And in this case, that's relatively safe for him. At the end of the day, maybe Carney might have the opinion that he's going for it now, and it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, right? Why is Carney going for it now? I think he might literally just be willing to take risk and to take a chance, right? And so both for the party and himself. So if he looks at it this way, running somewhere in Edmonton might not be the worst case scenario, in the sense that if you're successful in your gamble and you somehow manage to bring the party back to 30% and whatnot, then you probably win your seat and you're the leader of a decent opposition. And if your gamble fails, well, you lose your own seat and anyway you're out, because you're not going to be in politics, and you don't want to be just an MP for the next 4 years. So it might not be the worst decision out there for him.
That is the Rob Silver, obviously the husband of Katie Telford. That is his sort of theorem, is that Carney has like zero interest in leading a party with 50 seats.
Yeah.
For the next 4 years. It's an interesting take. Obviously, Rob is just guessing. He would like me to make that point very clear. But yeah, here's the thing. Boissonneau obviously endorsed Chrystia Freeland. Yes. I think it's interesting that Boissonneau thinks his endorsement is helpful. Because my reaction to that was that him endorsing Freeland was an in-kind contribution to Mark Carney.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
I'm sure she wasn't happy. It's the same as when Trudeau said, like, oh, Chrystia is literally just like me. She was with us the whole time. Like, come on, like, just shut up.
The press conference.
Yes.
Okay, Bryan Breguet, thank you so much for coming on the Scrimshaw Show. I'm hoping to have you back on during the federal campaign. I think this podcast went well enough that you will agree to say yes.
Yeah, no, that would be a pleasure. I mean, as I said, it's interesting, right? I mean, you're one of those people where, again, like in 2019, I could not stand you, but I think we both evolved, right? I mean, you used to be a jackass. I used to be a jackass as well. And I think we're much more moderate now and we agree on a lot more issues. So, but this was fun. And, I mean, you and the other person, I think, where I used to know, there are a few people on Twitter where the first few interactions I had with them were incredibly negative, like Rahim Mohammed. I mean, literally, I think the first interaction we've had was he called me a racist, I called him an idiot, and now, we're good friends. So this is interesting when those stories happen. So, but no, I would gladly come back. And, I'm hoping we will get an interesting federal election, as in, like, it will not be Poiliev at 45% the entire time because,
I want exactly 1 week where it's like, holy shit, could Mark Carney win? I don't care if he ends up winning or not. I don't care. I just want, like, what we got in 2021. Like, right? You'll remember this week well when it was like Main Street and Ecos both completely lost their minds. Just give me that. Just give me the daily trackers going wild. And just give me interesting writing, okay? Because I'm going to be writing.
What I want. I want 1 or 2 polls at some point where it gets to the point where, like, oh shit, could it happen? Could something change? Yeah. We got the same in 2018 in Ontario, where at some point we're like, wait, is the NDP actually doing this and beating Doug Ford? And ultimately, it didn't happen. But for a week, there was a small chance.
Right, exactly. I don't, I have no expectations the Liberals are gonna actually rally to that point, but Lord, I would love it. Just give me interesting content. Okay, that's all I want. Same with the Ontario election. Just give me interesting content, because I swear to God, if I have to just do a month worth of Doug Ford winning by 10 to 14 in every poll, I'm gonna blow my brains out. Like, I'm going to. I'm sorry. I can't do it. Anyways, Bryan Breguet, what the fuck is your Twitter handle these days?
It's Prominent Bryan, I think so, because it used to be Bryan Forlenga, but now it's Prominent.
Why did you get suspended off Twitter again? What the fuck did you say?
Okay, so remember a year and a half ago, remember when the Nazi Ukrainian guy went to Parliament? And,
Great job, everybody.
Yeah, and everybody was super upset, and I made a joke, and for the context, that's a 100-year-old Nazi, right? I mean, he's literally 99 or 100-year-old, and I think we're all so upset. We just need to find the guy and beat him up or punch him or something like this. And this was, I guess at face value it is like incitation to violence. And I think my understanding is now, my current understanding of X or Twitter under Elon Musk is, he fired everybody. They don't care what you say. You could say the N-word and whatnot, but the one thing they will not allow you to do is anything that would be considered as violence. And probably they just use AI for this. And so if you say anything like this, you will be banned. And the appeal process is a joke. I mean, you appeal and 10 seconds later you get your answer. So because nobody looks at those things. So yes. But I think if you search my name, you should just find my new Twitter handle that I came back as anonymous, right? Prominent Dog. And Prominent is, if people don't know, it's a joke. I mean, I'm not that, my ego isn't that big. It's because during the federal conservative leadership race, at some point, Patrick Brown put an email where he referred to me as a prominent supporter of Pierre Poilievre. So that's why I kept this. It's not because I think I'm prominent.
I once got suspended for, I can't remember if it was 12 or 24 hours off Twitter, off of my main, for begging Toronto City Councillor Josh Matlow to beat John Tory. Not physically beat him, just run for mayor and beat John Tory, because respectfully, fuck John Tory. So yeah, Twitter's moderation content rules are pretty fucked. Okay, Prominent Bryan on Twitter. Scrimshaw for me. Scrimshaw scripted.substack.com for my writing. Subscribe, like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. I probably should have said that at the top of this video. Thank you, Bryan Breguet, for doing this. We will have you back on during the inevitable federal election this year, whenever the hell that is, aka whenever Jagmeet Singh finds the balls to have an election. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Thank you so much. See you next time.